Welcome to our Axios Pro virtual event. I'm Richard Collins, retail reporter for Axios Pro. Welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Axios.com. Join the conversation today on Twitter with @AxiosPro and hashtag AxiosPro. Over the next 30 minutes, I will be joined by my colleague, Carrie Flynn, and we'll dive deep on two critical conversations on the media and retail industries. Our first guest is AB InBev's Global Chief Marketing Officer, Marcel Marcondes. Thanks for joining us, Marcel.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Though we got some better news on the inflation front, there's still concern about a potential downturn, and there's been several consecutive months of decline in ad spend. How does AB InBev think about how much it spends when faced with the specter of recession?
All right, so we're starting from the hot question. Okay, so here we go. Richard, I think the world has been interesting lately, right? In the last couple of years, because you can talk about pandemic, then you go from a pandemic to a war, then from war to inflation. So there's always a challenging situation ahead of us. The theme is the only thing that changes. The reason is the only thing that changes. But I think the best answer that I can give you, Richard, is that in our case, it's a privilege to work with beer because it's proven to be a very, very resilient category, a very resilient industry. So although, yes, of course, we're tracking all the economic indicators on a daily basis, we track even more deeply our consumers. And what consumers are telling us is that they're still connected. I mean, the occasion when they interact with beer is still relevant. They don't want to give up on getting together with friends and family. Beer is an affordable luxury. So we continue to observe beer to be a very resilient industry, even in times like this.
Yeah, I was going to say the good news is that there's probably never really a bad time for beer. I noted that your revenue was up 12% in the most recent quarter. From a marketing perspective, what within your toolkit was the most successful in helping drive that result? You also increased EBITDA and a lot of other metrics for the business as a whole.
Richard, I think it's all about building strong brands with consistency and for the long term. And this has never been so important for us as an organization. As you know, ABI is known regionally by its ability to grow inorganically via mergers and acquisitions, right? And by the way, no problem with that. We're very proud of our track record. Every industry went through a big process of consolidation, and we managed to lead that for the beer industry. But once you become the leaders in a category, then the growth algorithm has to change. And our mission now is to grow inorganically. Once we decide consciously to grow inorganically, brands become the most important asset of the company. So this is why all the marketing conversation around building brands is so important. And that's what we focus on. We're always talking about how to be more efficient. We're always talking about how to connect with our consumers in a stronger way, in a closer way. But the growth model for ABI now, Richard, is all about becoming a truly consumer-centric organization, driving a brand-led growth. And that's what we talk about and work against every single day.
Yeah, there's an argument that sometimes it's prudent for companies to tighten their belt. But I've also heard counter arguments that when you're faced with a downturn, when others are cutting back, it's actually the best time to increase ad spend. How do you think about that?
I think about that like this, Richard. I think we need to listen to consumers. The indicator that matters the most for us is consumer behavior. So we adjust our ways of working and our investment approaches depending on consumer behavior. So, for example, what we see in times like this is a big move towards in-home consumption. So e-commerce goes up. So our DTC operations become even more important for us, right? We tend to focus a little bit more on digital. We tend to focus on platforms and experiential moments that connect best with in-home occasions. We adjust our content given the routines that we expect our consumers to be living. That's the big driver of everything we do, consumer behavior. But having said that, Because of this brand-led growth that I just spoke about, we continue to support our brands with a lot of intensity. We're trying to simplify the business, but we are really supporting our brands with a lot of confidence because this is the engine of growth for the company.
Yeah, is there a bigger challenge for larger, more mature brands? And are you under more pressure to spend more, given that every percentage of growth is more essential? I mean, it's much easier when you're earlier, closer to your founding date, and you have a lot of room for growth. Having that brand presence, that brand always on consumers' minds, I would imagine that encourages you to even want to spend more. And in fact, like, brands have shown that they can falter if they don't maintain a certain level of spend.
No, for sure. And then we need to, we for sure have some guardrails of spend to make sure that we're playing the game to win. Let's put it this way, right? Because as leaders, that's what we need to do. Our job is to expand the category so everybody wins together and we grow together with the category. But Richard, it's not about investment only, because you can think about investments as a way to make our brands more visible. What really makes you win is to make our brands more relevant. So it's always a mix of the right level of investment with the right level of relevance in what you do, because otherwise you're just visible, and visibility doesn't really drive growth necessarily, right? You need to really connect with your consumers so you can have an influence in their behavior. So it's always a combination between the two.
Which channels are providing the best return on your investment right now? And if you may even elaborate, which are the worst? And are you shifting your dollars around accordingly? And I'm thinking of everything from traditional print and television advertising to Twitter and Facebook and TikTok.
Richard, I swear I don't mean to be over the fence when I answer the question like this, but it depends. But I mean it. So I think if I told you it's digital or it's open TV, it would be the wrong answer, because again, we follow consumer behavior, and depending on the job to be done we have with the specific brand, depending on the specific occasion that our brands are more relevant with, we have different channels. And so usually we have a mix. We connect with consumers in multiple ways, and we flex the different mixes, the different weights in terms of medium, depending on our objective. But I think to your point, the biggest mistake that usually companies do is to just follow one simple ROI number, saying, for example, this channel is the most effective one, so let's go all in behind that ROI. It's just because, unfortunately, we're dealing with human beings, right? So things are unfortunately not as simple as that. So you need to factor in consumer routine, consumer behavior, so that you can show up in the right mediums with the right content the right way. So it's a little more complicated than that. And we always take into consideration the combo, and then what's the residual ROI that we get out of that, instead of just checking the channels in isolation.
Just a quick question. Will you actually be increasing your ad spend going forward, decreasing it, or maintaining it? Can you give some insight onto that?
All that I can tell you is that we are going through a lot of momentum. So as you just mentioned, we just published very meaningful growth. By the way, we just achieved our all-time high volumes as an organization. And this growth is organic and driven by our main brands. So we're moving with confidence. So we do not want to reduce investments. We're going to do everything we can to continue to support our brand, so we can continue to expand the category and drive growth, so that the whole industry can progress and benefit from that.
If I may follow up on that, how do you actually determine how much you budget for a given year? I know that you say you have guardrails in place. Is it a top-heavy approach, or do you look at it from the bottom up, from the brand up, according to the needs of each brand, and then you kind of figure out what that spend is going to be? Or how does that process work?
So Richard, I would say, to keep it simple, it's twofold. Every brand of ours has, as we say, a job to be done. So that determines the kind of plan that we're going to have, and then the amount of money that we should spend. That's one of the routes that determines the investment. The other one is the level of ambition that we have in terms of results, right? So when we combine these two avenues, we usually land in a very clear scenario in terms of investment level that we should have for a given year. But on top of that, as I said in the beginning, it's never just about the investment, because either you really understand your consumers and you invest that money behind content initiatives that will be really meaningful to the consumers you're serving, or you're just spending money with no results. ROI, it's not just a matter of how much you invest, it's also about the quality and the relevance of the plan and the content that you have. And this is why building brands is such an exciting art and science all combined.
Another area I wanted to tackle was mergers and acquisitions, particularly, and how companies approach marketing spend, particularly after a big deal. And in this case, I'm thinking as an example, H.J. Heinz purchase of Kraft, although it could be a lot of different companies. And I think they chose to be very aggressive in cutting back costs. And one of those areas was in marketing. And I think that the brands ended up suffering for that, and they had to end up, correcting course on that. What kind of advice would you give to financiers in particular, like when they're thinking about this kind of issue?
No, I mean, I think that one thing, Robert, that I see in my conversations with colleagues from many industries and also learning from experience, be it via inorganic moves like M&As or when you're talking about organic growth as well, one common element that is very important to be addressed is complexity. So it's very common for large organizations, or whenever you acquire a company, for you to feel like you have a large portfolio to manage. So having focus, understanding which are the brands and what's the portfolio that is really well positioned to drive growth is key. So that despite of the amount of dollars you have to invest, the most important element to start with is to make sure that you will invest those dollars behind the brands that are better positioned to win. And you need to keep it simple. You need to keep it focused. Diluting efforts is a very important thing. It's a very big issue that big companies face on a daily basis.
I'd like to ask another question, switching a little bit more to the diversity front. Here a couple of years ago in 2021, I was actually tasked with watching the Super Bowl ads, and who were the brand spokespeople that a lot of the big advertisers were retaining to represent them. And while we had made progress in 2021, we kind of made a significant step back in a year later. How does AB InBev approach that? I mean, one of the complaints that I heard a lot was that there needs to be more people of color, more people from the disability community, more women who are in charge of these ad accounts, in charge of these advertising campaigns. And that would therefore, have a material, like a real visual impact on the actual ads that we saw during the Super Bowl and throughout the rest of the year. And I just curious, what's the industry doing, and how is AB InBev addressing that issue?
It's a very good question, Robert. And to me, the concept here is the following. We are a truly consumer-centric organization that drives organic growth via strong brands. So the step number one is for us to be able to mirror the reality of the consumers we serve out there when you think about our internal teams. So we need to have teams internally that are as diverse as the consumers we serve, because this is when you establish the right kind of connection. You have people that understand the consumers we're serving, and then this has an exponential impact in the work that we do. So, for example, after we started to do that, we increased significantly the quality of our work. We're very proud of being awarded by Cannes, for example, this year as the Creative Marketers of the Year, by Effie as the number one company in the world in marketing effectiveness. And this talks a lot about the quality of the work we do And this is all about connecting with consumers in meaningful ways. And then when we connect, when we think about the brands that are being recognized, and we see that brands that are driving growth, we have a correlation of more than 80%. So the more we have diverse teams inside that connect with the diversity of the consumers we serve, the better the work gets. The better the work gets, the more those brands grow, the more the company grows, the more the industry grows. So it's a whole chain affected by that process that starts by having the right people in the cockpit.
Thank you so much for your time, Marcel. I really appreciate it. Congratulations on a great last quarter.
Absolutely, Richard. And thanks a lot for the opportunity. It's been a big pleasure to talk to you.
And now over to my colleague, Carrie Flynn, for the next segment.
I'm Carrie Flynn, Media Deals Reporter for Axio Pro. Our next guest is Spotter founder and CEO, Aaron Debevoise. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Carrie. Nice to speak to you again. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to catch up.
So, as I hope the audience knows, our conversation today is about the creator economy. That's kind of the world that Spotter lives in. And that industry is so popular and growing. But what fascinates me is it's not at all new. You've worked in it for, I'd say, more than a decade, I believe. I'm wondering from your perspective, how you've seen the creator economy change since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a ton. And I've started working on YouTube businesses in 2005. So it's been more than a decade, as you said. And I think that kind of the biggest shifts that have happened have been around how much money and how much opportunity creators have to go out and expand their businesses to ultimately reach much bigger audiences. So for example, I think a lot of content discovery in the past was around, hey, what your friends are watching and, you know, kind of virality and so forth. And the recommendation engines on YouTube and TikTok have become much more personalized. And therefore, individual creators have had a lot of success when they can actually engage with their audiences in a way where they feel a deep connection to them. And so what we've seen is just the rise of very, very big creators in all different types of segments on YouTube. So you have the niche segments of, you know, specifically gaming, kids, entertainment, but you have even more niche segments that are really popular, like barbecue or baking or whatever. So you'd have lots of opportunities for many millions of creators to create great content. So big shifts.
That makes sense. You're talking about the diversity of content. I mean, I myself, you know, just spend a lot of time watching puppy videos, but I'm not everyone. So I'm curious, when it comes to Spotter, how is Spotter different than what you used to be involved with, multi-channel networks of years past? You know, similarly, middlemen who work with YouTubers, but those businesses, you know, for the most part collapse. So I'm wondering kind of how Spotter has changed in the way that really the business works.
Yeah, so Spotter's main goal is to provide not capital and knowledge to creators so that they can grow their businesses independently, right? And so it's not about whether as a company we can provide a service that's going to help a creator ultimately figure out how to create, right? Our job is to empower the creator to go out and be able to do as much as they possibly can dream of. And so there's a huge difference there. It's a lot more scalable for us to provide capital and insights than it is to say, hey, we're going to help you edit your content, or we're going to help you promote your content, and or other things like that. So we've stayed to the opportunity, we've stuck to the opportunity that will highly scale to lots of creators, but also scale with this individual creators as they move beyond in their journey. So we focus on full-time creators, which are people that have figured out how to make a full-time living, but maybe haven't hired a lot of people. And then their next step is to hire 1 or 2 people to make it to the next level. We'll work with that creator again and again as they continue to grow. So the next step might be hiring 10 people, right? And we're there again for them to help them through that process. And then we see enterprise creators like a Mr. Beast, right? Who's got multiple business lines and multiple channels and 50 plus people. And we're still helping that. It's still helping Jimmy get bigger and bigger. So we're there throughout the creator journey, but the creator journey is being driven by the creator and not promised by a service like an MCN.
That makes sense. So what you're saying, you're kind of, I guess, arguably less involved in a way, but clearly a very important part of a creator's journey. I'm glad you brought up Mr. Beast, aka Jimmy Donaldson, for those who don't know. As my colleague Sarah Fisher reported last month, he is looking to raise what may be $150 million at a 1.5 billion valuation. I'm guessing you can't comment on those reports, but I'm wondering if you can add color to the fact of if that valuation is reasonable. $1.5 billion for a YouTuber.
Well, absolutely. I think it's reasonable. I actually think that it could be low given the influence he has over such a large audience, but on a highly engaged basis. So he has over 110 million subscribers on YouTube, that when he launches a video, I mean, he just launched a video, I think, on the 12th of November, and it's already gotten over 40 million views in a few days, right? You're thinking, hey, the influence and the ability to launch new businesses, new products with that kind of audience is invaluable. We talk to people about, hey, how do we kind of recreate the ability for people to launch things like Honest Company and stuff like that, right? Jimmy's already launched 2 businesses that are highly successful. One is a burger brand, and the other one called Mr. Beast Burgers. The other one is a chocolate bar brand, which is called Feastables, and both are highly successful. So, and the way he's done it is he's brought CEOs in to run those businesses. So he's leveraging his brand to launch those businesses, and then actually building a scalable way to build them, or including a scalable way to build them. So I think he's worth a lot of money, and I think a lot of creators are probably worth significant amount more money than what their AdSense would tell them that they're worth. So we talk about creators as thinking about their assets, not just as the revenue that they're bringing in, but their brand value, their personal value. How can they actually help, with launching new brands? It's pretty incredible opportunity for investors.
That makes sense, that in terms of like how creators should value themselves, or I guess how you also value creators, is not based on their YouTube AdSense, not just based on the dollars they get from the ads that run in their videos. That makes a lot of sense. Their brand is bigger than that. Though I'm curious, so when it comes to evaluating the success of YouTubers, what you guys do is pretty unique, but you do have a competitor in some aspects, specifically Jelly Smack, which is a company backed by SoftBank. I'm curious, when you're competing with them or perhaps someone else for signing deals with YouTubers, how do you win out? Like, essentially, why do creators like Mr. Beast or others want to work with Spotter?
Yeah, Spotter, our mission is to provide capital and knowledge, right, to creators to scale their businesses. And we have a hyper focus on YouTube. YouTube is where there are billions of dollars being paid to creators for rewarding them for their work. And we are the best at providing the capital necessary for them to create even better rewards, right? So I think that our hyper focus on understanding the pain points of creators on YouTube, specifically, whether that be they struggle in hiring, right? They struggle with hiring editors. They want to figure out kind of how to invest the capital so that it will specifically help their YouTube experience. All of those things is what we focus on. So data and insights around, hey, what's happening with short form versus long form, or what are the right thumbnails to use? That's our specialty, and that's allowed us to build these partnerships with creators rather than be just a transaction with creators. And so that focus has allowed us to grow the number of channels we've worked with by almost 6 times this year versus last year, and actually grow the overall business and the amount of money we're deploying. We've deployed $700 million this year to creators. That's a significant growth versus last year. And so there's just more and more money to provide for creators when they know that the relationship with us is a true partnership.
Yeah, you said $700 million. That's impressive. And especially in this environment that constantly, it feels like every day I'm hearing about cutbacks in, advertising spend. And specifically with the creator economy startups too, there's been a bunch of layoffs, from Lightricks to Cameo to Patreon. from my understanding, Spotter has been immune so far, but do you expect we'll see more cuts across the wider creator economy industry? And if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there was a lot of growth opportunity that people were chasing, but in the creator economy, it was founded, right? There's so many more creators making so much more money in so many different ways, whether that be, like I said, specifically growing on YouTube or launching e-commerce businesses or distributing their content on other platforms. So there is a demand increase overall for content to be watched, right? If you saw this during COVID, ad rates declined, but viewership skyrocketed, right? Obviously, people were in their homes trying to find, cheap ways to entertain themselves. So I think that's going to continue to happen. And so the opportunity is going to get bigger. And I think there'll be more and more hiring in the creator economy. In fact, one of the biggest issues for creators themselves is to find more people to hire. They actually have a hard time finding, behind the camera talent, and managers and line producers and all sorts of things that there's just a ton of opportunity for. And we're just hearing it every day. So I think that it's going to continue to grow. I think the advertising side, is really interesting because, yeah, maybe big brand deals that are highly integrated with the creator's content might reduce a little bit. But my feeling is that the overall YouTube solution for advertisers is the cheapest, most measurable form of advertising that you can participate in, and you can do it with high quality content that is both long and short form. I think it's just an extraordinary opportunity for advertisers to transition their budgets away from what's not working towards what is working over the next few years.
So that's definitely an important thing for me and others to monitor, is how much money continues to get fueled into YouTube versus other platforms. One new area I wanted to talk to you about was the whole world of Web3 and the metaverse. I'm curious if that's something that you guys talk about at all. I know you said earlier that Spotter is just really focused on YouTube and YouTubers, but when you think of kind of the future of content consumption, is there anything you're considering there?
100%. I think it's obviously really early days, but when we saw things like play different games and saw that there's this connection between, or closer connection between the fan and the creator, so that the gamer is almost becoming the creator themselves, right, and making money at it. That's why when we think about capital and knowledge, we believe we'll transcend our business to actually meet that kind of opportunity in the future. So right now we're seeing, hey, multiple platforms are going to start to share in revenue with the creators like we see today. So maybe TikTok will share in the revenue the way YouTube is sharing in the revenue. But in 3 or 4 years, there's going to be millions and millions of more creators generating revenue in all sorts of ways that we can then participate in that growth and help fuel that growth. So we're very excited about what Web3 has to offer in the fact that it will create more creators for us to back. And so, yeah, we're looking at it, but there's no immediate movement for us to take.
That's great. Well, one other, I guess, less about the future, more about the current state of different social platforms. There were reports that Elon Musk is looking to court YouTubers over to Twitter. As someone who is clearly an expert in YouTube and creators, I'm curious if you think that could work at all.
Again, I think the biggest thing is, how do these platforms reward creators for their work? And is that reward measurable enough and predictable enough for them to dedicate hours? The biggest issue creators have is time, right? They don't really have tons of extra time. So they need to figure out ways to scale. If Twitter wants to entice YouTubers to come over to their platform, or Elon does, he's going to have to figure out the monetization side such that it's determinable by a creator to know, hey, if I put an hour of my time in creating something that's going to go on Twitter, what's that going to be worth to me? And they're going to compare it to their YouTube experience. And it's going to be hard to peel away from that unless it's a really specific, easily determinable number. So I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be hard. YouTube will probably pay $18 billion this year to creators. So it's a big challenge.
Yeah, well, like you said, and I think Elon and other folks should understand the whole time is money. Well, Aaron, that's
Yeah.
all we have time for today, but thank you so much for joining Axios.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for another virtual conversation that has made everyone smarter, faster. For the latest on retail and media deals, subscribe to Axios Pro by visiting axios.com/pro. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you on axiospro.com.